I'm going to come down now to the more day-to-day level by giving you tips and tricks from the trenches of innovation. That even if you're not trying to fundamentally transform your organization, I hope helps you understand, number one, what innovation is, number two, the lessons you learn from a shark, drinking a milkshake, flying a kite, and finally, what you as an individual can pledge to do to get better at this. The rhythm's going to be a little bit different this time. I will do the first two parts of this, then I'll give you a chance to practice, then I will close with the third part of it. So first, let's define innovation. I showed you my grandfather on the first slide of the presentation. This is the picture by which most of the world knew him. My grandfather was a legendary accountant, so well known that he was a member of the Accounting Hall of Fame. It is a real place. I'm not making it up. Here is a screenshot of it. To prove that it actually exists, you can see it's a pretty exciting group of people in the Accounting Hall of Fame. Now, my grandfather got to the Accounting Hall of Fame primarily for his academic work. He wrote 30 books in his career, most carrying titles like this: Management Control in Nonprofit Organizations. Now, as much as we would appreciate as a family you purchasing this book, I don't recommend it to you, because after all, it's not meant for normal people. My grandfather wrote dense academic books that required expert instruction. This was most of his career. In the early 1960s, however, he had an insight. These books sold very few copies, at very high price points, so it was okay. But there was a big opportunity he was missing. People who wanted to understand just the basics of accounting. So he innovated. In the early 1960s, he wrote the first version of this book, Essentials of Accounting. Out of curiosity, anyone see a version of this book in their career? I usually get a couple hands in a room this size. I see a few hands here. I counted 4 in the room. Thank you. Thank you. The family appreciates it. I got 3 copies of this book in my life. The first was a birthday present when I turned 8. Thanks, Grandpa. The second was when I got my first job out of college. I worked at a consulting company. They gave all new hires a copy of this book. The third was when I entered the Harvard Business School. At the time, they gave all new matriculating students a copy of this book. You go through this book, and it's very different than a dense academic book. It is a workbook where by filling in the blanks, you teach yourself the very basics of accounting. At the end of it, you can't master controls in nonprofit organizations, but you know what the dual aspect concept is. You can calculate days receivable. You have a language that you can use to talk to other people about accounting. My grandfather made it simple, he made it accessible, and in doing so, he opened up a completely new market. This is the 11th version of its book. It has sold more than 2 million copies in the 50 years of its existence. I will freely admit that's not Hunger Games or Harry Potter, but for an accounting book, that is a remarkable number. I love this story because it helps me share my very simple definition of innovation. 5 words in it. The first is something. This word is intentionally vague. We often think that innovation is done by scientists, by engineers, by the people wearing lab coats. But there are lots of different ways to innovate. What did my grandfather do? He innovated a pedagogy, the way in which he taught a subject. Innovation isn't just the job of the few. You can innovate how you teach, how you communicate, how you organize, how you act, how you market. Anyone can and everyone should. The second word is different. Now, we choose different here rather than a breakthrough or a great leap forward to remind us that sometimes the innovations that have the most impact are those that in classic disruptive fashion take something that was complicated and make it simple, take something that was expensive and make it affordable. You could argue that Essentials of Accounting is worse than being in a classroom guided by an expert instructor. No doubt it was. But because it was so much simpler and more affordable, many more people could enjoy it. We've got that in between, and then the final 2 words as the most important one: creates value. This distinguishes innovation from its precursors, invention and creativity. Those are critically important, but until you translate the creative spark into the production of revenues or profits or improvement in a process, in our eyes, you have not innovated. Let me reinforce this point. If I asked you to draw a symbol, something, an icon that shows what innovation is, what symbol would you draw? What object is connected with innovation? Light bulb. Light bulb. So here's a picture of my boy Charlie. I promised all my kids. This is my boy Charlie wearing the idea hat. Aha, I have an idea. The light bulb is the symbol that we associate with innovation. Who came up with the light bulb? Who invented it? Now, people say Edison. He didn't actually. The technology was invented by others before Edison. But the reason why we name Edison and the reason why we remember him is because he innovated the provision of light. The world's first electrical generating facility was owned by the Edison Electric Company in Lower Manhattan. It merged with one of its rivals, created General Electric, a company that lives on to today. Never forget Edison's quote. Genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. The spark is important, but the translation into value is the thing that matters. Now, when we talk about innovation, we often think about big things, new phones, planes that fly faster, etc. There's lots of room to think about everyday innovation as well. Let me give you a couple quick examples. This is a story about my 12-year-old niece, Maya Hunter, lives in the state of Colorado. Maya had a problem. Every night she liked to go to sleep with the door closed. She liked to have the dog sleeping on the bed with her. Predictably, at about 11 o'clock, the dog would wake up and start to whine, loud enough to wake up my sister, but not Maya, who was a pretty deep sleeper. My sister had to come, open the door, and let the dog out. My sister gave Maya an ultimatum. Either you figure out a way to not have this happen, or no more dog sleeping on your bed. Maya did something different that created value. For reasons I don't quite understand, my sister said, too complicated to explain, she has no doorknob on her door. Every night she runs a string between the door handle and her bed. The string is taut, the door is closed. The dog starts to whine. Maya gets up just enough to pull the string, the door opens, the dog goes out, she lets go, the door closes. Problem solved. Now the lesson in this is if an accounting professor and a 12-year-old girl can innovate, you have absolutely no excuse. Let me show you one final example of this before we talk a little bit about how to do this. This is Pedro. Pedro is a Shetland pony in England. Pedro has a problem. Can you see what that problem is? He is short. So Pedro is short, as Shetland ponies are, and because of that, he can't see out of his stall. So the person who runs the location where Pedro is based gave a group of children a challenge. Let Pedro see out of his stall. How would you solve that challenge? Shout out an answer. How do you let Pedro see? So I heard drill a hole. You could drill a hole in the door. Now the person who runs the place said, you can't change the door itself because we're going to put a big horse in there. Making the door translucent comes up too. What else could you do? You could put stairs. Now Pedro might leap out, so that would be a problem. Let me play a short little video clip that describes some of the ideas the kids thought of.
I put the tallest horse we have with the shortest horse, so if they put them in the stable together, Pedro can go on top.
It looks nice, but I think it's an awful idea because it's just dangerous.
He has headphones or a walkie-talkie. The kids that are working in the yard can tell him what's happening.
How is a horse supposed to learn English when all it says is neigh and, you know, just...
My idea is a seesaw.
My idea is to use the hot air balloons.
The walkie-talkies.
Which one is the winning idea?
So here's the winning idea, the Pedroscope. Like a periscope, you use mirrors to let people sit outside. Kids are amazingly inventive creatures. We'll talk more about them as we go through the day. But you see here the power of coming up with something different that creates value. Now there's a myth that makes it hard for all of us to do this. We believe that this is a mystery that's only mastered by the rare few. You need special DNA to innovate. Who do you think of as a great innovator? Who comes to mind? Who today is a great innovator? So I heard Elon Musk here. People often say Steve Jobs, and I have to remind them that Steve Jobs is dead, so he's not a good answer to that. But Elon Musk is the answer that comes up the most. So Elon Musk, Tesla, SpaceX, Solar City, PayPal before that. So we think we got to have his DNA to do this. The reality is, innovation is a discipline that anyone can master. And all it takes is remembering. You want to take a picture of this screen? I think all the materials will be distributed too, but I'll let you take a picture. All it takes is remembering a picture of a shark drinking a milkshake, flying a kite. There's lots of other stuff behind it, but you remember that picture, it gives you everything you need to start the process of doing something different that creates value. So let me start by talking about the milkshake. This is a famous parable that is told by my colleague Clay Christensen from the Harvard Business School. He has a book that just came out yesterday called Competing Against Luck that features this story front and center in the book. Here's the challenge. About 20 years ago now, a fast food company was trying to figure out how to grow the sales of its milkshake business. It did what you do. It went out and talked to customers and asked, what can I give you that will get you to buy more milkshakes? And people said, make them taste better, make them thicker, make them thinner, make them chocolatey, whatever. The company got all that input, did it, and nothing happened. So they tried a very different approach. They had a researcher stand in a store for 18 hours and watch. Try to see when people bought milkshakes, what they did before, what they did after. Then go and talk to people, and in language they could understand, ask them, what problem were you trying to solve? What job were you trying to get done that led to you hiring the milkshake? When you didn't hire the milkshake, what else did you hire? What did you like? What did you not like? Instead of focusing on the product, they focused on the problem, the job to be done. Turned out there was something interesting discovered. Milkshakes were purchased at 2 different times of the day. A lot of them were purchased in the morning. The job to be done was to provide companionship during a long, boring commute. A milkshake is great. You can sip it with one hand while you drive your car. It's thick, so it can take 45 minutes to suck it through the thin little straw. The word milk fools you into thinking maybe it's a little bit healthy, and all the inorganic materials mean it settles in the bottom of your stomach and stays there, so you're not hungry again for hours. In the afternoon, a different job shows up. This is a mother with a child, where the job she's trying to get done is to appease a small child. She's emotionally exhausted. She said no all day. The milkshake is her chance to reclaim her status as a hero. Here's the challenge. The characteristics that delight the morning job infuriate the afternoon job, because the mother sits there and watches and waits, while it takes the kid forever to suck the milkshake through the thin little straw. Most of them got thrown away half completed. So the company has this insight. In the morning, the job to be done is commuting companionship. In the afternoon, it's child appeasement. Once they understand that, the path to innovation is clear. In the morning, you make the shake thicker. You put in tiny chunks of fruit, not to make it more healthy, no one cares, but so that every once in a while you're driving, you get a little surprise. It makes your commute that much more fun. In the afternoon, you shrink it. You put the world's biggest straw on it. You make it thinner so that job can get done well. This is what great innovators do. They train themselves to look at the world through the eyes of the customer and ask the question, what is the job to be done? What is the progress the customer is trying to make? What stands in the way of her making that progress? What's the fundamental problem she cares about? Customers cannot articulate what they want, but they've got great language for describing the problems they are facing. So if you remember the milkshake, you remember the quest for innovation starts with a quest for finding problems worth solving. Let's talk about the shark next. One of the challenges people will have is they'll say, I'm not a creative person. I can't come up with an idea. Remember what Steve Jobs said about creativity. If you ask a creative person how they did something, they feel a little bit guilty. because creativity is nothing more than connecting things. Channeling the great quote from the Spanish artist Pablo Picasso, who once said, "Good artists copy, great artists steal." Once you find a problem worth solving, you go and steal something. Not literal theft, but you steal an idea. Because I guarantee someone in the world has solved that problem before. They might not be in your category, they might not be in your company, they might not be in your country, but you take an idea from one context, you bring it to another, and you've short-circuited the process of doing something different that creates value. So the shark. So about 10 years ago now, a little more than this, Fiona Fairhurst was hired by Speedo. The question she was asked is, how do we create a swimsuit that allows swimmers to go faster? Historically, the way people solved this problem was they reduced the friction in the swimsuit. Less friction, you go faster through water. Fairhurst framed it differently. She asked, where in nature is there something that's really big but swims really fast? Not surprisingly, she studied sharks. It turns out a shark can go 50 or 60 miles an hour in open water, and their skin is not perfectly smooth. Instead, they have these things called denticles on them that essentially propel them through the water. Like a good biomimicrist, Fairhurst took what occurred in nature, applied it to the Speedo fast suit, and every Olympic record was shattered, to the point where these suits were banned from the Olympic Games because an athletic competition was turning into a technological arms race. That's the second thing that great innovators do. They look broadly and borrow brilliant ideas wherever they might be. The shark reminds you of that. Flying a kite. You go back about 120 years ago and the world was obsessed. The machine age was upon us. Birds were flying, but humans weren't. The way that most people solved this problem is they came up with a version of their idea. They built planes, they strapped wings on their arms, and they jumped, and they prayed, and they crashed, and they hoped they recovered. The Wright brothers, who ultimately solved the problem, approached it in a fundamentally different way. Let's watch this video clip here. Supposed to be the entertainer playing in the background, but it's not. There's no words to this, so it's okay. I can sing for you, but you would not like that. So look at what the Wright brothers did. Everybody else was working on crazy contraptions that didn't work. The Wright brothers, before they flew a plane, they built a kite. The great thing about a kite is when it crashes, and I guarantee that it will, nobody gets hurt. To optimize their kite, they created a wind tunnel. This was simple, a cardboard box, bicycle spoke wire, and a fan. But imagine how it felt. 1901, the world is doing all this crazy stuff, and the Wright brothers, using the wind tunnel, run 200 experiments, testing 39 different types of wing design. They get real data, which allows them to ultimately create the planes that become what Philippines Airlines and others are flying through the air today. So there it is. This is what you need to remember to successfully confront the challenges of innovation. The shark drinking the milkshake, flying the kite. The milkshake reminds us to find the job to be done. Find the problem the customer can't adequately solve today. This might be the current customer you're serving. It might be someone that you can't serve today because your product is too complicated or too expensive. The shark reminds us to borrow brilliantly wherever an idea might be. And the kite reminds us to go and experiment in thoughtful ways. Before we go and launch something, find a way to prototype it, find a way to test it, find a way to de-risk it. Now we're going to go deeply into the idea of how do you address uncertainties and risk, how do you test ideas in the module that I do after lunch. But what I want you to do now in a quick activity is practice putting some of these ideas into motion. Pick an industry that's represented at your table. It might be your own industry, it might be one that somebody else has. Then pick one of the things that's here. It might be a company, Google, Facebook, Apple, Disney, or Four Seasons. It might be a person. I've got here a few choices to think about. This is Jeff Bezos from Amazon.com, very visionary thinker. Lady Gaga, singing at the Super Bowl next year. Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba in China. Richard Branson at Virgin, and Elon Musk from Tesla. Think about how if you were to adopt this persona or operate in a way that these companies operate, how that person or company would come and disrupt your industry. And then think about what you would do to actually make this happen. Think about the way that what this person would create, how the customer would get it, and how they will pay for it. So the idea here is in 10 minutes to very quickly practice the idea of thinking about things through the lens of the customer and borrowing inspiration from different places by acting like you're from a different company or you're an entirely different human being. So I expect that at least one person in the room will come up with something brilliant in the next 10 minutes. Let's see if I'm right. So 10 minutes, and then I will summarize what we've talked about and take some more questions from you. Go and wreak havoc.